Hello and welcome to Movie of the Year, the only podcast with the science and the screaming to determine the best movie for any given year. Of course, this season we are doing 1991, but we are in Bonus Town. These are all our very special bonus episodes where we where we approach the movies that were good and talk about them a little bit, but maybe not the ones that are going to win. Joining me, as always, in a non-competitive bonus roll function is my best friend Ryan. Hello, Ryan.
Greg, happy to be here, and thank you so much for once again saying that I'm your best friend.
Yes.
You texted me earlier, and it said, I hope that Nate or Emily become my best friend and not Ryan. Was that text meant for me?
Oh, did you get that? I'm sorry.
Who was that meant for?
My mom. I keep her appraised of everything going on with the podcast. And
what a coincidence that you're dealing with so many people with that same name.
Yeah.
You know, that was probably a different thing not related to this.
My mom's name's Ryan. It's really confusing. Joining us, as hinted at, our guest number one, Nate. Hello, Nate.
Oh, hi. It's me, guest number one, Nate.
And, of course, you brought guest number two, Emily. Hello, Emily.
Hi, Greg. How are you?
I'm very well. Emily, what are you from? Where could we find you? What have you been up to?
Well, you can find me co-hosting a wonderful, delightful podcast that Mike was most recently on for Dogtooth. We're called I Drink Your Podcast, or IDYP. And, yeah, you can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, all of that sort of fun stuff.
I love it. Nate, how about you? Where can we find you? What have you been up to?
Oh, man. I have been in the state of Delaware, so you can find me there.
Awesome.
But I also have a podcast, and it's called A Vague Idea. But it's going to change after we hit our 200th episode, so get ready. Just start creeping toward the edge of that seat of yours if you want to find out.
Is it going to be a more vague idea?
Oh, it's going to get even vaguer. It's going to be the vaguest idea possible. Yeah, we're going to barely... We're going to barely even stay topics, clearly.
That is actually most podcasts that are on iTunes, so I think you'll fit right in.
Yeah. I think I've been too cerebral, so we're going to try to dumb it down even further.
Yeah, fucking Nate, that's what everybody says about you. Too cerebral, for sure. That's all I hear about you.
That's what the judge convicted you of. Too cerebral. Well, that is where we are. That's who we are and where we're from. But the reason we are gathered here today is 1991's My Girl. So now, Ryan, I feel like you and I both have a extensive history with My Girl. But let's start with our guest. Do we have any history with 1991's My Girl, Emily?
This was my first time watching it.
Okay.
I had zero knowledge. I think I've seen Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone, the first one, and nothing else.
Okay.
So, no connections. But I did know who Jamie Lee Curtis is, and I knew what's-his-face from Ghostbusters,
of
so
course.
I recognized people.
Slimer
which I was
from
feeling good about.
Ghostbusters is in this movie. It's always
Also
fun
known
to
as
see
Onion Head.
Jamie Lee Curtis wanting to get with Slimer in this movie so bad. Nate, what sort of history do you have, if any, with this movie?
I was a wee boy of 10 years old when this movie came out, so I saw it probably half a dozen times, if not more, in my childhood. I hadn't seen it in probably 20 years. So this was like a fun retread of an old classic, and yeah, I mean, it really brought back those memories of the swinging 70s that I remember from 10 years before I was born.
Yeah, it is made in 91 and set in the shadowy mists of 1972. Ryan, I sense that you have the same sort of history as Nate, where you just watched this movie a lot as a kid. Is that true?
I didn't think so, but then watching it, I was like, I sort of knew every move this movie was going to make.
Yeah.
And not because it's an obvious, movie. I just think that I had seen this many times. Yes, maybe 10 minutes on TNT for my entire life.
Okay, so three of us have seen the heck out of it, and one of us is new to it. Emily, with your fresh perspective, what is your overall impression of the movie My Girl?
It was a lot for me to watch. I generally liked it, but it is not really a movie I would sit down and watch over and over again unless I had the nostalgia to it. So, especially because I was born in 92, so I don't know if it's just a youth thing, or what, but it was certainly something watching this coming of age story of this 11-year-old girl living in a funeral home, and her best friend womp womp dies.
What?
Spoilers.
Spoilers, right?
Spoiler.
I'm drinking a bee's knees in his honor.
Oh.
This movie very much features Chekhov's beehive. They're just like, here's a scene not about anything where we're whipping rocks at a beehive.
Chekhov's child coffin, too. That was the thing I noticed. The movie opens with her like, well, why is that coffin so small? Is that for a kid? And he's like, no, it's for just a small adult.
Ryan and Nate, what are your impressions rewatching the movie?
I mean, the first thing I want to do right now is go to my favorite S&M dungeon, Chekhov's child's coffin. That sounds like a lot of fun. I'm sorry, Greg. What was your question? I was thinking of that thing to say.
You saw it a lot as a kid. You've seen it now as an adult. Has your impression changed? Has it moved at all?
I think it's strange enough to be interesting. Like, I don't know if it's a good movie. I don't know how it would fare in our bracket. Well, I do know. If it was in our bracket, it would get fucking trashed. But as like an aside to 91 and as an aside to like seeing what 91 thought of the past, I think it's just weird enough where a lot of these movies really try to be not weird. You know, like they try to be as four-quadrant, as acceptable to all people as possible. And it's not disgusting. It just swings for the fences in some crazy ways.
And goes, like, tries to go in a lot of different ways at the same time, and then much like a cartoon character, gets kind of like snapped back into place.
Yeah.
And maybe doesn't end up going that many places at all. Nate, did the meter shift at all for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it just sort of took some of the nostalgic shine off of it, because it is, like you just said, it's a movie that is cartoonishly trying to do a lot of stuff, and the things that I remembered being emotionally resonant were much less so, with the exception of child death, which kind of just, I mean, it's child death. Like
that'll always get you.
If you don't feel a little something when a child dies in a picture, it's time to go. It's time to pick up a rose and sing to the audience.
Time to go to jail.
Probably for murder of that child.
We are going to get in real deep on the nitty-gritty, especially on some of these things that we have talked about. And we're going to do that right after this break. Howard Zieff's My Girl is the story of Vada Sultenfuss. That's her name. A young girl learning about life while living in the shadow of death. That makes her life sound really tragic, but actually she just lives in a funeral home. But her mom is dead. That's kind of tragic. Oh, and she sort of thinks it's her own fault. Also pretty tragic. And her spoiler alert, best friend spoiler alert, is spoiled by a bunch of overly alert bees, which you better bet was pretty tragic to me when I saw it as a 10-year-old softboy, which I still technically am. The movie is funny, warm, compassionate, and beautiful, but it is also an untidy mess that may bite off a bit more than it was ever prepared to chew. Also, it features two kids, Anna Chlumsky and Kieran Culkin's younger brother. For whatever reason, we don't do a lot of movies starring kids on this show. Maybe it's because they are terrible actors. How does the 1-2 punch of Chlumsky and Culkin come off performance-wise? What about in the screenplay? Do these two characters deserve whatever modern-day notoriety they may have, Ryan?
Okay, so let's start with the Chlumsk.
Uh-huh.
She was, like, picked out of a big group, and I would say that what she lacks in acting skills and running skills, this girl cannot run at all. I think she has star charm for sure. She has star charm for days, and every time she walks into a scene, there is this ownership of it, even if you can see that she's a little immature as an actress.
Definitely. Do you agree with that, Nate?
I do, yeah. I think the big bonus of this movie is how really decent the kids are. Like, they carry their roles well, because I think a lot of the faults are in the storytelling and not them, which is cool. Yeah, I think they're great.
Do you agree, Emily?
Well, kind of. I think that as someone who has recently become a fan of movies, I was never really into movies until I started a fucking podcast. Oh, sorry. Am I supposed to not swear on this podcast?
You're not supposed to talk about other podcasts. What the hell?
Yeah. What the heck?
I'm starting to understand more about like acting and directing and cinematography. So I don't know if I'm really an expert on anything, but I thoroughly enjoyed the kids' performances because they felt like kids primarily. Yes. And as a teacher, I see that all day long. The only parts that were a little bit jarring were some of the lines and dialogue that were used, but they felt like kids, and that was something I could get behind.
I mean, we got to talk about the 80s and 90s as far as, like, having kids, and probably mostly on TV, but a little bit in movies, saying things like, I only hang out with people who I find intellectually stimulating.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's the kind of stuff that we got all the time. And I don't want them to be like, booger, booger, poopy, booger, but Vada is a lot. A lot
they
for the audience and a lot for the family.
They shouldn't talk about trickle-down economics so much.
Right. I mean, they're very pro-Nixon.
Yeah. That's a kind of sort of like surprise little like stinger at the very end of the movie. By the way, all these people, they're fucking Republican. Oh, okay. Damn. Well, I guess you really recontextualize that. I personally feel like that the kids do a pretty good job. I think that the movie doesn't ask enough out of Macaulay Culkin. Like, this is his movie that came out right after Home Alone. And he kind of
should have been setting traps for robbers the entire time.
He's kind of
or bees at least.
he's just kind of a turd. The character is, and I think that Macaulay Culkin doesn't respond to that super well. Also, I feel like near the end of the movie, whether it's the writers or the child actors, they drop the ball and they can't perform in some of the necessary scenes. Like, I don't know how you stage a child actor getting stung to death by bees, but it shouldn't be like, ow, wait, and then you just cut away. And I don't know how hard it would be as an actor to actually, like, receive the news that your best friend had died and respond to it emotionally as, like, an 11-year-old child. But, like, it looks like she tries to emote, and then when she fails, they just cut immediately.
You're being a bee right now, Greg.
Okay, I'm just saying, the movie does not prepare you for his suddenly passing. And it feels like no part of the movie is prepared to really digest that. It's one of the 18 things the movie tries to do, and it's like you don't have the writing, you don't have the performers, and you don't have the directing to carry this off. Why not find some way to continue just having it be a nice little family movie?
You know, you have the prep when, like Nate was talking about with Chekhov going off everywhere.
Baby coffins.
Baby coffins.
2
5 for
sale.
$1.
Buy one, get one free. Only one used at the moment.
Man, Greg, your baby coffin material strikes again.
Once again, I find a way to go to that well of baby coffin jokes.
But that's only if you watch it again. Is the foreshadowing so obvious? Like, if you watch it for a second time, and that's like, oh, we got to fucking ram some shit in the screenplay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is really rushed at the end. I on this rewatch, I was surprised at how suddenly it was like, oh hey, maybe we'll get married if you can't marry the teacher, and then I'm gonna ride into the woods and go right back to the beehive that we just left. We literally ran from it minutes ago. I think time gets compressed in this movie. That's another topic though.
And I think for me, watching it for the first time, I really felt that sudden death.
Yeah.
I was not expecting him to die, to the point where I was sitting on the couch going, he's going to be allergic to bees. Man, if he dies, like, that'll be hilarious. And I'm sitting there laughing my butt off when the sheriff or whatever comes up to the house to tell not his parents,
but Dan Aykroyd.
Right? I'm like, oh, okay.
Dan Aykroyd, you're a dad, right?
We got to tell Slimer from Ghostbusters stat.
Guys, he did not play. Just because Dan Aykroyd also ate 200 hot dogs in Ghostbusters does not mean he is Slimer.
I mean, he's the town corpse handler though, so the cops have to tell him. We got a body.
You were talking about that
empty
way. Baby coffin. Yeah, and you're gonna be so jazzed when you hear about this. Perfect fit for that.
The way that they handled it too, just in case their child actors were not up to it, was they did a full Martha's Pearls, and that they dropped the glasses. They dropped Macaulay Culkin's glasses in slow motion to the ground instead of Martha Wayne's pearls shattering. Although I would have preferred that also when the glasses hit down, it then cut to the mood ring, and the mood ring went dark. The mood is now bad.
But I mean,
this
is the origin of Darth Vada, though, right? Is that her love is killed?
Her love passes away.
I gotta know, Nate. Have you been sitting on that joke for a while? Because
no,
that seems too brilliant for me.
It luckily sprang to me.
Just for listeners, if you're not
That's
watching
amazing.
Just for listeners, Nate just took off his shirt and it says Darth Vader tattooed on his chest.
Yeah. Yep.
This feels dumb while you're tattooing it on me now, but the payoff's going to be
just
huge.
wait.
But you wait. I'm going to be on a podcast in 7 years, and they'll be ready.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the power couple of the center of this movie, Jamie Lee Curtis and Slimer from Ghostbusters. Well, that is very, very funny. Or very sad, and perhaps now you have something to think about. Or very problematic, and perhaps we have something to think about. But in any event, I'm sure you have some reaction to what you're listening to. So why not check us out on the social media? You can go to Instagram or Twitter and find us at YourPopFilter. Email contacts@YourPopFilter. Hey, everybody. Keep watching them movies. Gentle friends, most of this movie is about the blossoming love story between Jamie Lee Curtis and Dan Aykroyd. How do we feel about the couple at the center of this? She's one of the most enchanting women to ever grace the screen, and he played Slimer in the movie Slimer and the Guys. Do we feel... And I mean, like, he has to be coaxed pretty aggressively into a relationship with Jamie. Can he not see her? Is he having trouble focusing his eyes on what she looks like?
His wife died 10 years ago.
I think
10 years ago? Come on, Slimer, get over it.
I think the drive-thru is really romantic. Or the drive-in, sorry. Don't go to a drive-thru movie. There's not enough time. I think the drive-in's really romantic.
We only saw a little bit.
And I'd like to go. And Slimer turns around and he's like, get out of my office. I'm working here.
It goes immediately through a wall, leaving that weird big sheen that he leaves every time he passes through a surface. Yeah, but... Now, I know that, like, a lot of movies do this, where you take a sort of dumpy guy and pair him with, you know, a much more attractive woman.
Is this Slimer Can Fuck Himself, that show?
the sitcom about Slimer.
Getting a hot wife.
Turns into a drama. But does the movie carry it off? Like, do we believe it at any point? Do we maybe sort of near the end start to believe it, Emily?
I think the moment that I actually believed that they were kind of romantically attached to one another was weirdly at Thomas J's funeral, where they're sneaking off and canoodling. Otherwise, Jamie Lee Curtis is throwing herself at this guy, and he is not paying attention to anything about her. And, I mean, like you said, has he seen anything? Is he blind? Like, I don't know what's happening.
Even after they hit it off, and, like, they basically, like, on July 4th, he is, like, stood up for her. There's the moment, anytime a man manifests violence, women are always drawn to that. That's the oldest story in the book.
There's a part of this movie that is just straight up a Popeye cartoon. Like, Dan Aykroyd eats spinach, and Jamie Lee Curtis goes, "Oh, my man." But
then they're like kind of like into each other. And then she's like, I want to go look at the fireworks. And he's like, there they are. They're the same every year. It's like, dude, come on. Can't you try to, like, get into this just a little bit?
He needs Sebastian the Crab to tell him to kiss her. That crab.
But it just, to me, it felt like, are they supposed to be they're supposed to be one of the centers of the movie, right?
Yeah, and I think that this happens so much, again, more on TV, but let's write a movie where the schlubby guy, it's not that they, like, build a relationship. It's that this hot babe comes and gets a job and then falls all over him. And then
almost right away, too, right?
And the whole thing, it's not like, how do we sort of, express our mutual attraction? It's like she is tripping over ottomans to get to this guy's butt and look at his butt.
It's something about, doing makeup on corpses all day and seeing him work with corpses all day that really gets her going.
She says to him, let's go to a romantic movie at the romantic drive-in, the most romantic place there is. And he goes, let's play bingo at a church.
Right.
And then just before that, she reads one of the most basic obituaries I've ever heard. And he's like, I wrote that.
He's
that's
so
his
proud of
pickup line.
himself.
Yeah. She's like that shit.
Well, and she's so happy to applaud his writing skill too. Like that was really amazing. I mean,
in lieu of wow.
Yeah, it sounds better than instead. I think.
You're
Which
right.
Was,
it sounds French.
An original title, by the way. In lieu of.
In lieu of. Okay, I have a question about titles. So, okay, the title of this movie is My Girl. Okay,
which would imply that Dan Aykroyd is the center of the film because
he's
possessive. Or
who's the girl?
Yeah.
Well, let's start there. Let's start. Who's the girl?
Vada.
Okay, so she's Vada, right? So, but the movie's not called Girl, so it's not the main character, right? It's My Girl. So now we've moved off of her, right? Who's the My? To whom does the My refer?
The audience.
It's okay. So it's like our girl.
She's our girl.
Okay.
Is it our girl though? It says My Girl.
Because doesn't that?
Well, we were fighting over her the whole movie.
I'm probably nitpicking here, but isn't there a way in which by like calling it My Girl, you're kind of like removing her from sort of the center of everything and then inserting some unnamed person?
I think there's a trope of like, we don't know what to title this. Let's spin the wheel of song titles.
Yeah.
Right.
Whatever it lands on is what we're picking.
Okay. Maybe it could be as simple as that.
Nostalgia good.
It can't be.
That's not a bad title.
It can't be the Macaulay Culkin kid because he's cute or whatever, but he's an absolute cipher. There's just nothing there. What an absolute flavorless performance and
let
child.
me tell you this from experience. You cannot have that many allergies and have people find you attractive.
Greg, I think you're thinking way too much into this because the producer put money out there to get someone to come up with a better title.
Yeah.
So
there's a contest, and some of them are great, including Vada ! Which
Boom.
means death to infidels in some language. So they didn't pick that one.
Darth Vader. Did they ever even consider Darth Vader?
Shit, Nate,
really
put your shirt back on, dude.
Sorry. Look, it's warm in here. I gotta pop a top. You know.
Why is it always warm to people who have fucking abs? You ever notice that?
Because I got thinking about the title. The part of the reason I asked, I got thinking if it had to either do with Jamie Lee Curtis or with her as the she over the course of this movie, this girl goes from hating me to becoming really like my daughter, and I kind of also go from filling a no role in her life to kind of becoming her mother, and so we are each other's girls / women,
and that's almost the plot of the movie. It's one of the 9 plots of the movie that gets abandoned about 2/3 of the way through.
Greg, please don't say things that make us all three want to talk at the same time. What the
right? Maybe you're onto something, Greg, because, Vada didn't really have her mother, and so she was this lost girl, and then as time goes on, she found her place within her world of this small town in whatever city. I don't know.
And her big thing is
there's a hairbrushing scene towards the end that I think is so important because it's not magical. It's just we are now. It's not like we are bonding with Hollywood bondage.
Chekhov's child coffin. Yep, we're back to that.
But instead, it's they're past that. They're just in their relationship now. They have that, and in a lot of ways, as I don't know, manic pixie dream woman as Jamie Lee Curtis is to Dan Aykroyd, she is the fucking greatest stepmom you could ever imagine.
Oh, yeah.
That would be. She has her own house on wheels. If you're 11 years old, that would have been dope. But that's
just got a big cookie jar full of money. She's got a whole bunch of lady porn.
Oh, I'd like a cookie, but I'd also like $35.
I would love $35 to go hang out with my teacher, Griffin Dunn.
Yeah, and that's the core relationship of the movie for sure.
I think it's interesting too that she does handle the menstruation scene very well. That whole getting the period the first time thing. She
handles everything well. She does a good job of just kind of when Anna Chomsky, when Vada purposefully is insulting to her, she does a good job of being huh, what? Maybe I don't really hear this. I'm not sure. I'm not following along.
And when Vada runs out and says, I'm hemorrhaging, Jamie Lee Curtis speaks Vada at that point.
Yes.
She knows. Oh, did this happen in the bathroom? I know what's going on then.
Because we know through a couple of scenes that Vada's a hypochondriac. One of the things the movie doesn't sell wholeheartedly, but does tell you at one point is that she's a hypochondriac. And we know that the thing that she's really digesting in the entire movie is she carries the guilt of her mother's death. She thinks that she did it. She thinks that she's been the cause of death. And we know at the end of the movie, if she hadn't fully healed from her conversation with Jamie Lee Curtis, she would look at the ring that her friend died trying to retrieve, and she would be like, shit, that was my fucking fault. But
I honestly feel like that
she has learned that deaths are not her fault, and so she does not spend much time being like, wow, this kid died trying to retrieve my ring.
Even though it is her fault.
Yeah, and it's something that could be replaced for like a nickel, probably, at the corner drugstore.
Oh, nickel's a lot of money.
It's not...
We're talking 1972, okay?
We have
this is
bountiful,
like pre-inflation.
wistful walk-in healthcare in a doctor's office, and we're worrying about a mood ring.
It's run-in healthcare, but it's the same thing, more or less.
Back then, that was backwards because you had to give... All healthcare was that you had to give the doctor a lollipop, and then that was payment. That was all you had to do.
When we come back, the ominous-sounding boomer porn.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening so far. And let me just tell you that everything ahead of this commercial is much better than what came before it. That's my guarantee. While I have you here, let me tell you about a website. It's called yourpopfilter.com. And it's everything you need that's related to Pop Filter. Everything Mike, everything Ryan, everything Greg, everything Cassie, everything is there at yourpopfilter.com. While you're there, go to yourpopfilter.com/Amazon. Make that your new Amazon bookmark and do your shopping from there. That way, we get a little piece of the action, and Amazon doesn't. Make sure you're also listening to everything that Pop Filter has to offer, which includes the Superhero Show, a podcast that covers every single TV show that's based on a comic book or comic book property, and Movie of the Year, where we sit down and try and figure out what is the single greatest movie of any given year. That's Superhero Show. That's Movie of the Year. And that's yourpopfilter.com. Rate, subscribe, review. Bye.
How does boomer porn sit now, knowing that Vada Sultenfuss would have more likely than not voted for Donald Trump? How much charm has the movie, much like other movies that take place in the late 60s, early 70s, lost because of recent events? All of it?
A lot. I would say, like, it is kind of, I feel like it's all gross. And then that last line of the movie that we talked about earlier of like, oh, and by the way, Nixon will be president. And then the movie just rolls credits.
Yeah, dude, like, why not just be like, and by the way, the bees went on to be president. We elected the bees mayor of town, and they parlayed that into a presidential run.
If we found out that the bees shaped themselves as a human being and put on shoes, and that was Nixon,
I would vote
surprised?
for that.
I'm not a crook. I'm several hundred crooks all swarming together. But I think that is supposed to be a really lighthearted, fun sort of end. And I guess in part of it, it's because she's still so naive that she doesn't know that Watergate.
Right, we're all like, ah ha ha, so funny. But
she doesn't know that law and order policy is going to cause trouble for her town's one black citizen who works with her dad.
Yeah, because doesn't it kind of have this weird way of like, it's a funny little ha-ha at the end of the movie, and then you like start kind of thinking about the movie, and the way it starts to work on the events of the movie, I think starts to make you more and more uncomfortable. Because like then you're like, oh yeah, Dan Aykroyd just like sort of like used violence to get out of a situation with another guy over like it's literally a property dispute. It's a dispute about a woman, but it's also literally a dispute about property at the same time. And you're like, oh yeah, I don't know about that. And then you realize like, oh yeah, this is a white ass movie, which in the 90s most were. I don't know. It didn't seem worth like the funny chuckle at the end, the way it kind of unschooled the movie. Am I overreacting, Ryan?
No, I think this is happening a lot with a lot of different movies. I know that the stock has fallen so much over the last 5 years on Forrest Gump, and a lot of it is because it's kind of a corny movie that doesn't hold up, but a lot of it is because fuck you guys, like keep heroicizing this generation of just like no matter where you were doing something heroic and crazy. Like shut the fuck up. No, you weren't. You know, like, and if you were then, you're not now. You're reverse heroic now. And I don't think that this generation of communities, and then like, oh, let's play the music. Let's play some CCR. Yep. Like they go to the bumper car place and CCR plays because CCR must play in every movie from this time. it doesn't have the same effect anymore.
No, I think
if it's not about Vietnam, it's not going to have an impact.
I think it's interesting, too, because this movie does that thing that a lot of 90s movies do, where it backs into, hey, we'll set this movie 20 or 30 years back so that we can have men say really insensitive, shitty things about women. and it'll be funny, because we know we're past that at the time that people are watching the movie, so we'll all get a good chuckle about Uncle Mustache saying that, oh, women now, you just fuck them, it's great.
If we're being honest, that means that our writers can't write anything else. But if we said it in the past, it will all be okay.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, Nate, I will say that women are feeling that a lot with the internet. So I don't know if putting something back in time and being like, oh, yeah, old white guys are definitely talking about this. That's pretty bad right now, too.
Yeah, no, it's
right.
awful. It's awful all the way down. I'm not saying that.
I don't know if it makes it better because it's in the 70s.
No, but see, I like it doesn't. But I think, Nate, you do have a point there in that they thought that it did.
Yeah,
right.
And that was so much of the 90s. Was we were like, remember how people used to not just get it like we all get it now? Like the world's such a good place now, and it's gonna just keep getting better. Like over the next couple decades, because we've basically almost perfected democratic capitalism, and it's just going to make rays are just going to shoot out from the country all around the world, bringing equality and justice. And more than anything else, the job is mostly done, everybody. Like, we mostly did it. We killed racism. We killed sexism. Like, we don't have to think about gay people. We don't even really know that much about trans people yet, all the way back in the 90s. And this sense of self-satisfaction is so pervasive in these movies.
Yeah.
And so I think that when they do set things 20 years ago, they're just like, man, we thought we knew. We had no idea. Not like now.
At one point, Slimer tells his daughter, Baby Slimer. Is that the name of the movie, Baby Slimer?
Slimer. It's called Slimer and Baby Slimer.
Go ahead and put whatever you want in the cart, Vada. Like, they're shopping, and she's like, she keeps throwing things in the cart. If I did that to my mother's shopping cart when I was a kid, like, that's not how real life works. I would have gotten the shit kicked out of me by the other men in the store if I put something in the cart that my mom did not want. It's just what we have. The other thing that we have to think about with Forrest Gump and stuff like that is we're not watching documentary footage of this time. This is the time that we were told was great. And then we watch scripted movies about how it was great, whose goal is to talk about how great it was. And that, I think, has made not only us clouded, but also boomers have forgotten their own past and replaced it with footage of movies.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. 100%.
At the same time, railing against Hollywood's undue influence in the culture. Does anybody in this movie say Vietnam?
No, I don't think so.
No?
Like, I mean, the conflicts have been on for like 7 years or something at that point.
No, they're in this small town. They're sheltered by everything.
Yeah,
you know,
the perfect, like, the Anytown America, Anytown USA. That's the whole point, is like, look how great this was. Even though that fucking lead actor is from Canada. Slimer is from Canada.
Boo. A kind of interesting artifact of this movie is that, like, watching it now, are there still currently like mom and pop family owned funeral homes? Is that even a thing anymore?
It's all in the back of a Walmart.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah. Like, most funeral homes are like, they ship off all of their bodies to like centralized locations that are basically like Walmarts of embalming. And the job is much less like family-run businesses now, and it's more like big conglomerates that like just kind of hide the fact that they're like huge chains, basically, like Chipotle's of funeral homes.
What? My mind is being blown right now.
Check it out. Like, most people that actually work with dead bodies now, they will work in like a huge, I don't know how huge it is. It's like a warehouse, though, where they see multiple bodies that are then like shipped out to funeral homes. Like, the funeral homes intake the body, but they're worked on another location then shipped out, because this is like kind of ceased to be a family business and is just now a big corpo business.
So how often are you burying the wrong person at a funeral?
Honestly, dude, have you ever seen a body at a funeral? It's like, I guess that's the person.
Yeah.
I guess I have closure. Like, if they were shot with like the makeup gun from The Simpsons, I guess that's what my grandpa looked like.
Can we talk about Thomas J. in the funeral? Because
let's do it.
I was 100% expecting him to have way more disfigurements of dying from an dying from an allergic reaction to bees.
Oh, what if he was like,
I was expecting
he had like
him to be
100-pound head?
Right. And there's these cute little pimples on his face.
Which again, like, can't Jamie Lee Curtis cover that up? She made the church marm look gorgeous. So
it looks not gross enough and also not hot enough.
Here's what I'm thinking. I think he could go with a nice cat eye.
There's never enough blue eyeshadow. She says it herself in the movie.
Smoky.
Never enough
never
blue
have
eyeshadow.
blue eyeshadow. Oh, man, that would have been I would have loved to watch Thomas J's parents. And I know they seem sweet in this movie, but let's remember what generation they're from. Those people were monsters. See Thomas J's corpse with a ton of blue eyeshadow and watch their reaction.
I mean, let's face it. Every single adult in this movie participated in January 6th.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
they all flew in.
There's not a single person who lived long enough who didn't, charter a private jet to fly in and go threaten Nancy Pelosi.
I'm Vada Sultenfuss, and I'm here for the country.
What a fucking name.
So we talked about it a little bit, but this movie tries to do a million things at once. One of them is like dealing with child mortality. But definitely, like, growing up is another part. Hypochondria. What are some of the other issues this movie tries to deal with, and do we feel like they pick them up and dispense with them too quickly?
The one that I think that is handled perfectly, and this is in the news recently because Turning Red is getting a lot of shit for not just being like a episode of Barney. Is Vada shoving Thomas J and saying, and do not talk to me for 5 to 7 days.
5 to 7 days.
That's still in my head, and I think about that so often as, like, planning my life out.
Here's my problem with Turning Red. Have you ever seen how these animals fight, really?
When they stand up on their hind legs and put their arms up?
Replace every fight scene in Turning Red with the way those red pandas actually fight. I think it'd be a lot funnier and a lot cuter because they have one move, which is they get really tall and then they just tip forward, and two of them will literally do it at each other nonstop. And it's like, this is not a fight, you guys.
We're just giving each other concussions over and over again.
Just because you fight that way, Greg, doesn't mean we want to see it in a Pixar movie.
But it is adorable. So like there's like a few scenes about old age, right? There's Grandmoo,
right, with her dementia or something.
And so death is not just part of what's talked about, but aging is as well. But it's one of these things that the movie is like, yeah, look at it, right? And then it's like, well, no, what are you saying about
right?
this?
I mean, 6 feet under, this is not. It doesn't explore anything with any kind of depth.
I mean, Greg, because we're in the 91 season right now, and when Grandmoo starts singing as Vada's on the ground, isn't this closer to Addams Family than 6 Feet Under?
They mention Addams Family. When he looks at the house, he's like, "What?" Like her husband, who's like brought his little brother to come reclaim the thing. Right. He's like, "Hey, will you live with the Addams Family here?" And I was like, you better watch out, dude, because they will do what they want to do, say what they want to do, dance how they want to dance, play how they want to play. But also,
no, Greg, no.
They'll kick and slap a friend, right?
That's insane.
They will kick and slap a friend. They are the Addams Family. When we come back, it is time to give this movie some awards. My Girl did not win any Academy Awards, which is really a shame.
What?
Because I think it deserved at least Best Original Screenplay. I don't know what it deserves. But it's definitely going to deserve all the awards we're giving out right now because it is the only movie eligible. And let's start with, we've talked a little bit about the performances. Let's start with Best Pound-for-Pound performance. Now, this could be somebody just in the movie for a very brief amount of time if they can carry their weight, if they do well enough. So for Pound, Emily, who do you think delivers the best performance?
Absolutely Grandmoo. First off, she has the best fucking name out of all of these characters. But I didn't even know who Ann Nelson was. Again, I don't know much about movies, but apparently she's like pretty decently well known back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, etc. But
60s.
I really loved her. You know, the singing, the way that she was able to really show like the deteriorating of her brain and just like interacting with her family. Honestly, I would have preferred a movie that was just around that. You know, her granddaughter who she raised coming to terms with that loss
and suddenly being like in charge of raising, of like keeping track of her, so that
like
her dad
switching roles.
Yeah,
that was of all the tearjerker moments of this movie where Dan Aykroyd says that after the mom died, she became very close to grandmother, or grandmoo, excuse me. So and now Vada has to watch her slip away as well. It's like fuck, man.
Yeah, and yet that's a very different type of tragedy to have to like go through, which is not someone suddenly disappearing, but someone disappearing like sort of a page at a time and watching that slow deterioration. Like, again, the movie could give us more of that. I agree, Emily. Like, I think maybe centering that a little bit more would be interesting, especially if we're looking at like this family of women and what's happened to them. But it was the 90s, and they weren't about to do that. Nate, who do you think had the best pound for pound performance?
I mean, I had Grandmoo on the list too. Anybody who can take a tuba that close and not start moving, like a lesser actor starts dancing when Slimer's playing the tuba that close, like you start to move.
Just so listeners know, Nate's wedding was all tuba music the entire time. 9 tubas.
Nice.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Nate and his partner both walked in with their own tubas.
Slowest
Ryan.
walk down the aisle available. Womp.
Is it going to be...
Womp, 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 womp.
But they're not even fat. What are they doing?
Seriously. Imagine being a person of size walking past that wedding. Hey, F you. All right. Ryan, do you agree? Is it a clean sweep for Grandmoo?
No, it is not Grandmoo.
Oh, shut up.
Silly people. Although I love when... in the beginning, when Vada pulls the prank and says, "Oh, the body must have gotten out of the coffin,"
that was good.
and then walks into the room where she's rocking, and I can just imagine her sitting there thinking, but not being able to say, like, "What the fuck, man? I'm sitting right here." No, I'm gonna give it to Anna Klumsky for sure. Of just this like natural star power that didn't work out for her for like 10 years, and then was on Veep and was just firing off. Rated R insults as a constant rate as everybody else on that show.
Yeah, she really, like, you can see the seeds of it. It's the same performer, but who knew, becoming an adult made her better at her job. I think I'm going to have to give it to her, Ryan, instead of Grandmoo. Sorry, Grandmoo stands out there.
Everybody's entitled to be wrong.
Nate, let's start with you for director moment. Now, we don't have a ton of or I don't know if you are familiar with a ton of the oeuvre of what's his name now, Howard Zieff. But what do you think is the director moment?
I had really hard time with this. I think the best thing I can say is it's just sort of pointing the camera at the kids and letting them act the scene. I don't know. Like he does a good job of framing the pastoral nature of this boomer porn. Right? Like he gets how to make photograph style shots.
Okay, so sort of like the living photography style. All right, Emily, what do you say?
Okay, I don't know if I fully understood this moment, especially with such a well-known director as, what was his name?
Howard Zieff.
Okay, right.
Guys, he made My Girl too.
Oh my gosh. I felt that whenever we transitioned from Vada actually talking and interacting with characters to any sort of random narration that was just her thought process, it was really clunky, and I feel like that was the director's signature move right there.
Yes, sort of awkward cuts. Yeah, like the timing of the cuts of some of this movie were like, oh man, you really, that's the best you could do?
The things that would happen or say, you'd go, wait, really? Is this what you chose?
Oh, the editor is also going through puberty. I see.
I think it's impressive that I was able to do this at all. I'm a child. Ryan, what do you think? What is the director's signature moment?
So I had to do a little bit of research for this, but he came from the world of commercials, and he was able to he cast as stars of his commercials in his early days people like Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro, who don't really fit the part of what we think of. Like those aren't Robert Redfords, And I do think that any other director or any other studio may have fought for, like, this should be Christina Ricci and Macaulay Culkin. And for him to go out and cast this girl who I think, like nobody had ever heard of before and is able to shine so much in this movie. I do believe she just won pound for pound performance on the Movie of the Year podcast.
She did. Yeah.
I think that's what his thing is like finding these diamonds in the rough.
Okay, so finding the performer. Man, how good would this movie be if it was Anna Klumsky and Christina Ricci?
There we go. Wait, that was a movie, right?
Ooh.
Gold Diggers. The
Legend
of Cave Bear.
Wow. Yeah, like 3 years after this. Good thing we did that Christina Ricci retrospective. Let's see. I'm going to say pointing the camera and just letting it roll is going to be the signature moment. Good job, Howard. A lot of them were like, what if we just didn't frame the shot? And he was like, no, I refuse. We will always point the camera at the action.
I've seen other directors do this thing where they like put their fingers together like to make a frame. So I'm going to do that now. And the actor should be in between my fingers.
Yeah. And then I'll hold it here, and then you bring the camera and point it the exact same way, and then I'll move my fingers real quick.
We're so sorry, Howard Zieff. I'm sure you're great.
Honestly,
I think he might not be alive anymore.
I think he's dead.
I looked at his filmography, and there was like movies I had heard of but had not seen, and I think he would say his signature was like looking at like the wacky relationship between the sexes, like. He was always teasing out all the different ways in which modern men and women were circling around each other and trying to figure each other out.
He really nailed that.
Yeah. Man,
Emily, he is
just gotta
dead.
love
I know.
You just gotta love a guy who's like, you know what? I'm gonna capture the essence of the man-woman experience. Because I've definitely seen some of that. I have an idea of what goes on.
I am one of the two of those.
Yeah.
I can do this.
I'm sure as a man I have access to everything women think and feel.
Jane Campion just won an Oscar for doing this exact same thing for a career, but no, we'll throw Howard Zieff on that same level.
Yeah, but see, there is a way in which women are able to access the interior spaces of men that men simply cannot replicate. A woman, because I think of the nature of culture and how much male experience is portrayed constantly, it seems to be like someone like Jane Campion could make a movie about both sides of that experience. This guy, to me, doesn't seem like he apprehends that enough of the world to truly do that.
But you can see him saying that he does.
Yes, no,
and
yeah,
that's
definitely,
important.
yeah. Well, because the whole movie is like we've figured out so much stuff, haven't we, everybody? It's been basically 20 years, and now like we know how all this works.
Right,
like,
we can talk about periods and death, and we can talk about dementia, and we can talk about child death. We can talk about small coffins. You know, it's all this shit. We're so good at talking about really deep, horrible things.
And still wrapping in under an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing,
We don't need to linger in any of those topics. We get it.
Ryan, the next award, I think, is going to be a clean sweep on one topic, but maybe not. It's cringe. What made you cringe, big guy?
Oh, it has to be where we are swept away in this boomer porn, and she's riding her bike away. She is now, like, we had a 16 Candles ending where she was like, oh, I'll be in a dress and hang out with girls from now on. And then as she's riding away on her bike, says, fucking Nixon is the Republican candidate. And I expected, like, a Thriller ending, like the music video from Nate's favorite musician, Michael Jackson, where she turns and looks at the camera and it freeze frames as she's laughing. Like, just to let you know, this whole city keeps fucking people of color and queers in their place. And then just fades.
She's got the yellow contact lenses.
Oh, man.
Just like Spiro Agnew.
You know, doesn't being a monster make you not eligible for vice president? Shouldn't we do that from now on?
Yeah, Ryan. Being a monster makes you not eligible for American political office. That's exactly how it
You're
works.
a certified
right.
monster.
You nailed it. None of those people could ever be monsters. All right, Emily, what made you cringe?
Oh, I had so many, but really I'm serious. I had so many, but honestly, it's the whole crush on a teacher thing that just made me throw up mentally, I guess.
Wait, Emily, what's your date of?
Oh, yeah, I don't know if you have heard me say I'm a teacher. But the idea that, like, an 11-year-old girl is in love with her teacher, I guess I didn't really have that many male teachers, but still, it just really grossed me out.
I will say,
even whenever he, like, hugged her.
Yeah.
I know
Don't
it was
touch
like,
her.
I see his
Don't
hands.
fucking touch
I
her.
see his hands. Everything's okay, but it still was just, ew. Ew, gross, gross, gross.
Well, that's that boomer
Emily,
porn. It's the 70s when it was okay. Like, male teachers could hug anyone they wanted because the woke mob hadn't come for them yet.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
Oh, dearie.
Yeah, that's... Emily, I kind of feel that way whenever we watch these movies that are centered around kids. I'm always just like, man, don't have kids be in these fucking movies. Get these kids away from like all the people making these movies. Like, get the child away from Griffin Dunn. Get the like. There's a part where Vada is sitting with her uncle, and they're like watching the fireworks, and his arms around her, and I'm like, dude, stop! Like, seriously, like, I know you're supposed to be uncle and niece or whatever, but like, could you just sit next to her and not touch her? Because like, you guys are all sus, and like, I don't want to watch you interact with children. It grosses me out.
And then he said, I like the color of your toenails. Do you want some of my beer? Like, what are we doing here? That's so disgusting.
Nate, what made you cringe?
I mean, everything we've said is great. I was going to...
Wait, okay. So Nate supports everything that we've been talking about. Just a little side note.
I just want to be clear on my position here. I am supportive of everyone else's moments. But I think that the sexy sex poem about sex that the hippie woman reads that is just in there so that all the guys can leer at her, and then we can be like, hey, that's right.
She did just see that like an 11-year-old girl walked in, right?
Yeah.
And she still reads it. It's not that she reads it. She still reads it with like the 1-900 sex line voice.
Sultry sexiness.
And then like runs her hand down the front of herself.
Yeah, she's doing the... yeah.
Again, like probably 0 women were consulted in the creation of like this whole scene, right? Like nobody ever was like, is this something that a woman would do or something that a man would pretend that a woman would do?
Especially because when you look at her boyfriend, he is Matt Stone, co-creator of South Park.
Dude, what was that guy's deal? Oh my God.
He was a meditator. That was his deal. And meditating involves holding hands and trying to collect vibes.
I clocked
tell
that dude.
me what I feel.
Yeah, dude. I clocked that dude as soon as the scene opened, and I was like, okay, Anna's got to stay away from that dude. She's got to stay away from Griffin Dunn, right? She's got to stay away from her uncle. You just got to keep all these dudes the fuck away from her. Let's see. What honestly, fundamentally, I think what made me cringe the hardest in all that stuff was the like. And by the way, this whole time we've all been Republicans. You just watched a movie about middle America, you fool. You absolute fool. I know that was not the intention of the stinger, but that's how it felt. All right, so let's have some recommendations. This movie maybe left our adult selves a little underwhelmed. Is there something that might have left us overwhelmed? Emily?
I'm very excited because I just watched this movie for the first time as well. But it's the 90s. It's got a child actor. It's got Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Boom.
Of course it's going to be amazing. Last Action Hero. Fucking incredible. I did not expect what was going to happen in that movie, and I loved it. I'm so glad I got to experience that as an adult.
Would you say
you just 100% got yourself invited back to this show?
Yes.
Is it the action version
Nate,
of
you're
My
on
Girl?
Notice.
Say that one more time.
Is it the action movie version of My Girl?
It's way better. There is a daughter in there.
Veronica Vaughn. So hot.
The daughter in that is Veronica Vaughn?
Pete Sampras's wife?
Pete Sampras's wife, Veronica Sampras Vaughn.
Nate, what do you recommend to our listeners?
I'm going to recommend a movie that is both boomer porn and a story about adults not understanding children and the people playing children not understanding children. The classic Rebel Without a Cause.
Oh, wow. Dang. That's very filmic. I like that. That sounds like a smart solution.
Plus a kid dies in the movie. Spoilers.
If that's what you're into, you got it here.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't remember that the original line of that movie, "What are you rebelling against?" is bees.
Bees.
Looks like it's got a lot of white people too.
Yeah.
Yep. It's got white people for days. Ryan, what do you recommend?
I tried to with the recommendations or the recommendations.
Thank you.
Go for stuff that hasn't been seen as much as it should. And you know what? This hasn't either. When I look at Vada Sultenfuss, I think about Lindsay Weir, and that's what I think the next jump is. With the it's a little bit later in time, but with the green jacket, but with the still like precocious but smarter, rebelling against parents. watch Freaks and Geeks. There's a lot of My Girl that feels like a TV show. Like, we didn't have enough time to develop this, you know? Like, if we had the time, and I guess maybe this is 6 feet under later, but if we had the time, like, there would be so much more nuance around the Sultenfuss home. I think so much of that is in Lindsay in Freaks and Geeks. So if you want more Vada, that's where I would go.
That's a good one, man. Freaks and Geeks. Anytime you can recommend people watch that. I was gonna say, if you love child actors that come across really like children, which I think the best moments of this movie, that's what they capture. No movie has captured the way kids really talk and interact, I think, in quite the way Goonies
Yes!
did.
I thought that's where you were going to go.
Goonies is just like Steven Spielberg was himself a child, so he knows the plan is just point the camera at these kids being kids. And also, I have to say, this I feel the same way about Goonies that I felt about My Girl, which is like, someone protect these kids. They're very talented and they're very funny, but like, make sure everybody's looking out for the kids.
We did Goonies on Movie of the Year.
We did.
And the whole time we were like, that Mouth kid, that kid named Mouth, every time anything pops up, he's like, what is that, a penis? Look at a penis. Like, penises are funny. That's how kids work. Like, that is the most accurate kid thing you can possibly say.
And yet, so often when we try to write kids, we write them more like Vada's more clunky lines.
Right.
You know? I wish for discourse more at my intellectual level. It's like, no, that even smart kids don't talk.
You just need kids screaming at each other, talking about how you wouldn't punch someone if they punched you in the face and broke into your home. Like, literally, that happened to me today as kids are playing Uno in my classroom. Like, they're just yelling at each other talking over each other. Those are kids.
Kids will say, like, they'll say a funny thing, and then right after it, they'll be like, I was all like, and then they'll repeat the funny thing. Good job, kids.
Well, we all know that this movie can win awards they can win our Moodies, our famous Moodies, for acting and for directing and stuff like that. But it can't win Movie of the Year because it's just a bonus movie. Do we think that was that this would have had a chance otherwise? Seeing a lot of head shaking. No. This one, almost right away, you're like, oh, yeah, this is one of the other movies of 1991.
I'm not sad that we did it. It does strike this weird balance. It feels to me like the nostalgia plus the Vada of it all, it feels like it's like a mixture of To Kill a Mockingbird and Annie Hall. Like, it has this scout-like character, but at some point she'll be at the grocery store and she'll be like, I had a Ken and a Barbie, but then they started fucking in the van too often. So I threw him off the cliff. It's like, what the hell was that? That's not like when we think about like boomer porn thoughts in kids' head. It's like the Wonder Years. It's not about how you just let two toys die because they were having too much sex. It was. I think it was a good attempt, but there was as many swings and misses as there were home runs.
Yeah, and the home runs are like very endearing. And I think there are good moments. They're like great performances in this, and they all have their moments. But it doesn't hang together. It never really.
It's a hangout movie that doesn't totally work.
Yeah, and I think that it's a little directionless in the end, and it suffers from all the things that we talked about. Nate and Emily, do you agree? Do you think this movie had any chance to be Movie of the Year?
No, not at all. And I think the point that someone made earlier about this could have been like a series. If this was like even one season of a television show, it would feel more coherent and meaningful. But it just kind of suffers from that sort of our nostalgia era. Like, anything that I saw when I was 10 seemed like it was put together because it was a movie and I was watching it and I was 10. And now when you go back and watch it, you're like, oh, that's not quite a movie. That's parts of movies.
It's a bunch of scenes.
Yeah, they definitely hired actors and filmed it.
It is at all times too much and not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, but also partially because obviously Movie of the Year is going to be Hook, so whatever.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
Yeah, the Hook army is out. We are countless, Ryan. We are legion.
Somebody get
We're
John
like the
Popper
Lost
on
Boys.
the phone.
Well, thank you so much to our guests, Nate and Emily. They told us where we can catch them at the top of the show. What you need to catch is those movies. So, hey, keep watching them, won't you? boomer porn.